This is a response to Bede, my friend on X. It seems to me that we have a strange number of things in common. What I choose to focus on in most of my interactions, I don't have the energy or inclination. It's not my attitude to go and seek out differences with people and then analyze the differences or attack various points of belief. Because we live in an age that's incredibly hostile towards religious faith. We know this to be true. It's around us constantly. So it seems to me a rather waste of my energy and also a squandering of any goodwill that I might build up among my cohort and acquaintances like you. We've never met. Uh, but I've been oddly interested in what you have to say, mostly because of common assumptions that we make about our age. We're both fervently religious, of course. Uh, I don't know anything about your situation. I'm not making any assumptions there. I'm a family man. I have children. I want to raise my children in the faith. I want these young people to love Jesus. I want them to be loyal to the faith in which they're raised. I want to cultivate those things, and it seems as if everything in our society has been renovated to counteract those good desires, to encourage families, to encourage family formation, to encourage durable marriages, to encourage parents that want to impart faith to their children. We know that everything in the West, just generally right now, has been set against those essential motivations, those essential elements in carrying on Christian faith from one generation to another. Just by itself, we know that to be the case. So we are both of the opinion, both you and I, that theology and praxis matter tremendously. In this, we are both post liberal or illiberal on some level. If we were to take one of the great charters of liberalism, the Bill of Rights, that posits that speech in some sense does not matter, that no one really knows what the truth is. Therefore, we must have freedom of speech and freedom of the press so that we might discover what we think is the best thing. It encourages the proliferation of endless opinions about things like religion, for instance, that has fractured us, and in the long run, it has severely damaged and brought into disrepute any sincerely held religious tenet or practice. And that would be the case both for you and for me. I don't think this is in the least controversial as a point. One of the basic assumptions of modernity would be, in Richard Weaver's words, the idea that it does not matter what a man believes so long as he doesn't take his beliefs seriously. You and I are not moderns. And because this is relatively rare in our set of acquaintances, I've always liked that about you. I affirm that about you, in that we're part of a very small set in the modern world where we do think that these things actually do matter and they do make a difference. And of course, in a religious context, the stakes are obviously very high because we think that this has import for the fate of our immortal souls and that we need to get these things right. You and I are in total agreement there. We aren't liberals in that old sense, in that we think that these things are at best uh, well, we have to be apathetic about those primary loyalties and convictions, in that we cannot believe that they are in fact divine. We cannot ultimately endorse even this basic Christian tenet of divine revelation, that God has revealed religion to us and it is our duty to follow it, right? That is contrary to the organization of the modern world. We think, you and I, if I might make some assumptions about you, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I both believe that faith, that practice, that loyalty, both to our religious tenets and practice, but also loyalty to things like our families, loyalty to our particular country and nation, our fellow citizens, even, that those things really do matter. And in that, we are not modern liberals. We are not men of the left, and we might categorize most of the the folks that we would recognize in our political life. We would call them conservatives, as people who have organized to defend the existing order, rather than realize that the existing order undermines the things that the so-called cultural conservatives or political conservatives claim that they care about, like imparting their religion to their children or imparting patriotism to them, a basic love of their country, of their nation. So while it seems that we have many grounds to cooperate on, this isn't, it doesn't seem to me to be the case coming from you. Now, just so, when you you are very exclusive, um, I like hearing your perspectives because it's such a throwback. You might say it's as if I'm listening to a 17th century New England Puritan at times. I recognize where you're coming from, and it makes sense to me out of my historical study because I'm primarily, well, my profession is historian. Strange as that might sound, it's true. Um, that's how I provide for my family. I talk history for a living, but so I appreciate where you're coming from, though we certainly have our differences in religion. I don't know so much about your politics, but it seems that we would have grounds on which to cooperate with one another. But because we are post-liberal, we have higher loyalties finally that must separate us. But we live in a time of such incredible hostility to these things that we say are most important, especially our religious belief and practice. It seems as if we should cooperate if we desire to preserve those things that we count as most important. Both of us are inclined to prefer reactionary reformation. I would describe myself that way too. Though I'm not a reformed Christian, obviously, I would still describe our situation in a similar way. We can't, in that we find that, or you find that you can't cooperate. I'm much more inclined towards that position myself, in spite of our differences. We will certainly be destroyed by the establishment that's arrayed against us if we can't. And this is one of the great messages from the American Revolution. We have that old banner, "Unite or die," "Join or die." That kind of slogan is actually applicable to us. I'm involved in an organization called the Old Glory Club, which has been of great personal value to me. I need not go into why, but I was canceled and had to create a new way to support my family. So, in these circumstances, LARPing, if I might poke you with that term, LARPing, as an intolerant reformer with fantasies of physically attacking other Christians on sectarian differences. I've heard it said by others, and I'm in agreement with them. If, say, the Roman Catholics found themselves in a position of political and cultural dominance, then they would again, certainly traditional or conservative sorts of Catholics, serious Catholics, anti-modern Catholics, post-liberal Catholics, to be clear, Catholics more like you and I, they would be intolerant. They might start persecution. They might exclude Protestants from political office, say, which was very common in these pre-liberal societies. But it seems to me that actually proposing that now is bad for all of us. So we're in no position to pillage monasteries, for instance. Though we might look back at our Protestant history and see that in there and lionize those leaders in the historical context, which I know you do, and I think you've got a right to that. I'm not denying that, but saying that that's what we should do now, that is just absurd. It seems to me. What is our position now? Well, the Catholic monasteries, which are the only substantial establishment of monasteries in America anyway. I'm an American, so I see it in that context. They are mostly empty. They're mostly abandoned, actually, due to the Catholic's own reforms. Now, I'm not a Catholic, and you know that, but I see that as a precipitous kind of decline, a part of their religious life that has always been there. Uh, it's falling apart, and they have a lack of people joining, obviously, and most of these communities are aging out, but they've also been systematically discouraged by their own hierarchy through modernist reforms. So it comes to mind there was a monastery, a convent actually, in New Orleans that was just recently purchased by a Jewish real estate developer who bought out the aging nuns who were all cloistered in there, a beautiful facility that's very old, and he will turn it into condominiums. So that is your pillaging. Um, that's the only pillaging that's going on right now, and that is not strengthening any religious sect. It is strengthening the secular establishment, the consumer nature of our society, the materialism that both you and I deplore. We have fewer institutions of a religious character all around us. I do not celebrate empty churches. I do not celebrate churches whose doctrine has been systematically undermined until it mirrors the political platform of the left today. I don't celebrate that in the least because none of the people so inspired to invest and build those institutions, be it a congregational church from the Puritan heritage of Massachusetts, even, and I would even go as far as to say even the Universalists, they used to have so much more substantial and even religious things to say than they do now. Now they simply mouth the establishment viewpoints, and they are the certain political party at prayer. We can make comparisons to uh, cultural conservatives, Republicans, that have done the same with their more evangelical churches, and they preach the points about defending Israel at all cost, and they think that that's the purpose of their religious organization, to defend the modern atheist state of Israel and whatever they might do. Um, so we're up against the Pride Month establishment. And we know what this means. Even Barack Obama would be canceled under the current dispensation for suggesting civil unions instead of gay marriage. That's how far we've come in such a short amount of time. And we know the power that the establishment has against us. People in people in employment where they might express these opinions, for instance, school administrators, and be it even in a private school context where you would think that a private Christian school not only has administrators that are hired to make such a stand, um, the conservative backers of these institutions will turn on them, will feed them to their leftist foes in an effort to get off, to avoid being targeted themselves. They aren't even willing to risk the opprobrium of the establishment for the sake of their children's education and encouragement in the faith. This is our circumstance right now. Perhaps you know of schools for children, private schools, that are willing to make such stands. They are few and far between. Having spent many years in them, I can speak from experience there, at least, and I will not work for those institutions anymore because of the betrayal that is so prominent in them. It's just too dangerous because we know the results. Across the West now, people have their bank accounts seized. They're blacklisted from banking institutions. They may not be able to open a checking account. People with positions like yours and mine. These are very durable blacklists, and we can make examples of people. If you follow these kinds of stories that try to get work in completely unrelated fields that do not involve presenting opinion or talking in front of people in the least. They might do something menial and still find themselves excluded from employment. We have examples in the increasingly dreadful circumstances of the United Kingdom where people silently praying outside of abortion clinics are being arrested and imprisoned. And they are clearing out violent felons from their prisons in order to house the thought criminals. A really extraordinary circumstance. Now, I'm up on these things, perhaps, and perhaps too much taken in by these circumstances. I'm very impressed by them, and it is dramatically impacted the way that I live. But this is the world that we're living in now. We are in no position to attack each other. Neither of us have any cultural cachet. Neither of us have any political power. And so fantasies about attacking each other on sectarian lines and excluding each other politically or culturally, or denying, the right of a monastery to house its own initiates, to own property and the like. That is as far removed from us as the white movement in Bolshevik Russia, at least for the time being. I mean, we aren't in a violent civil war now, though there are those that say that's coming. God deliver us from all of that. We don't want that. We want, well, certainly I want to be able to raise my children in peace. So, all that said, once again, I have a friendly disposition towards you for the various reasons I've mentioned. I've got absolutely no interest in analyzing how much Old Testament content there is in the Orthodox Divine Liturgy. I don't find this in the least controversial, though you seem to think that this is something that's excluded from our liturgy somehow. That's just not true. Um, I'm not interested in arguing about it. I'm not the sort that goes to analyze theology, certainly not on social media. How many characters do they have in Twitter? How many characters can you type? It's always cutting me off. I want to share quotes that I love and things like that, and it's always not enough space for it. My assumptions about you asked about what assumptions I'm making about your beliefs, and you claimed I was very mistaken. Well, I have no brief for that. I don't actually know what sect you belong to. My assumption is that you are a radical English dissenter, that you obviously like various Puritans from that period of history. And on that ground, I've been analyzing and talking about the Puritans in the historical context for my whole career. I'm an Americanist. I've taught American history. I continue to teach it. I'm familiar with the Puritans and their beliefs, and I can respect them. I disagree, but that's another matter. So once again, I reiterate, it seems to me that we have more in common than not. It doesn't mean that we can cooperate, unfortunately, but I wanted to make the assertion here. What's much more important than analysis is attitude, and what's far more important than elucidating exactly where we stand. We know that our heritage, our different allegiances are ultimately in conflict with one another. We are living in a pluralist context that was built by former regimes, and now we're watching it fall apart. It was built to permit the likes of you and me to live in the same society together and be subject to the same law. Now, that's not how it works today. Of course, we're watching the dissolution of these institutions, but our attitude, a faithful attitude, and I think what's necessary, a charitable disposition, is far more important than our ability to analyze or argue or practice apologetics for our sects. And you can stick me in there. I don't mind if you call me a sectarian. My adherence is so small in the American context. I really don't mind. I know that I'm an extreme minority, and that's fine. But all that said, it seems to me that we would have grounds on which to cooperate, and I would rather see more of that than not.